Our guest for this segment is a really old friend by the name of John Durkee from KWGS Radio in Tulsa. I love the way you say your W's.
W.
W.
It's not W, it's W.
W, like WLS.
W. That's where it comes from.
Exactly.
The Big 89.
John, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and you?
Well, I feel like I've got a bullseye on my back. Other than that,
Being a journalist, are you?
well, you know, sometimes I used to refuse that. I used to correct people when they'd call me a journalist because I thought, you know, you got to earn your stripes. And then I figured after the first 25 years, maybe I was getting to that role. But I finally made the crossover. You've been a journalist for a great many years.
About 45.
Holy Toledo.
Yeah.
Well,
And sometimes it feels like the stripes are done with a bullwhip across the back anymore.
you're among friends. I can't help you once you walk through that door.
That's true.
I've been in the business. I've been in front of a camera 47 years, behind a mic half a century, I think. I think it's right in there. You ever lived through a time like this before, John, when the people are told that we are the enemy of the people?
Absolutely not. Think back 50 years ago, Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America at the height of the Vietnam War. And now we're the enemy of the people. It just, yeah, it's mind-blowing. I've never seen anything like
know
this.
Many years back when I started in news, I was told by a news director I really respected, if you upset both sides, you've done your job.
Absolutely.
Now you have to think about that advice, because if you do the story correctly, you have upset both sides. One side will say, well, you didn't do enough, and the other side will say you did too much. But I had a good defense attorney tell me once, there's no excuse for the truth. And I've remembered that and stuck by it. And I've only been sued once. It was for $6 million, and he went to prison.
Well, that's good.
I'm
Not you.
very happy about that.
But yeah, I have that same analogy that I can remember 20 years ago doing abortion stories. And we'd get calls from the left, we'd get calls from the right. And both of them upset over the story we just did. And I figure, okay, if I have both sides calling me to complain, we're right where we need to be. We're right in the middle.
And you know, it goes without saying, folks at home may find this surprising, but if you go back to the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, I heard about this, but I didn't see it until 9/11. And let me tell you what that was. I was doing a show, kind of a light, fluffy show where I'd take phone calls. I was over at Channel 6 5 nights a week when 9/11 happened, and when the Oklahoma City bombing happened. That's what I meant to say. And people were calling in upset because all of the stations were covering what happened in Oklahoma City and taking away their sitcom. Now that told me one thing. I have no explanation for what's going on today. I can't begin. I don't understand it.
It's amazing. You know, we hear the term fake news bannered about, and no one defines fake news. You know, is it a story you don't agree with? Is it a story that's actually factually wrong? You know, and it goes that whole spectrum. You'll have people, well, that's fake news because I don't agree with it. That's not fake, that's your perception.
Where do we go from here, John? Any idea? I know the damage so far to the Constitution has been minimal. I know the founding fathers had no idea there would be such a thing as Fox News, a state-run publication and operation. I know that they had no idea we'd be facing such turmoil, political turmoil, and such division.
Right.
And somehow they managed to give us documents that serve as not only the owner's manual, but how to keep it together, this experiment we call democracy.
That framed document in Philadelphia, we cannot afford to lose that. That is the most important, most precious document in this country. All of the amendments, we hear a lot about the Second Amendment. We don't hear too much about the First Amendment other than freedom of religion. You don't hear about the freedom of the press. I think all of those amendments are vital to our success as a country.
I hope the next time somebody accuses me of putting out fake news, I hope they'll take just a moment and tell me how. Because I want to get a handle on it. If I'm doing that, I want to stop it. Mm-hmm. But if I'm not doing it and they can't do it, we may have a problem.
Well, I've had people confront me over saying something is fake news. And it's not fake. The story was legitimate. They just didn't like the story. They didn't like the angle we took. They didn't like, it used to be you got the news straightforward, and Walter Cronkite gave it to you, and that's the way it is. Now people seek out news not for the information, but for their perspective. Sorry to use your show name there, but you look for news that fits your agenda. Well, that's dangerous to all of us, extremely dangerous, and that's what's going on. I don't want information, I want confirmation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. I have to remember that. I find it interesting. I've heard people say, I get all my news from Fox, or I get all my news from MSNBC, and both are guilty of the same thing. If you don't read the New York Times and the Post,
right,
you're just shoring up your own beliefs.
You should get your news from various sources.
You bet. I remember
and then make up your own mind about it.
This used to be a two-newspaper town, remember?
Mm-hmm. Sure do.
Differing editorials, different styles, and it was competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And I moved here from a competitive market, Little Rock, Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was cutthroat. And I walked in and, hi, want to go with us? I said, but you're the competition. I know. Okay.
How's that going to work?
You want me in the front seat or the back?
Yeah, I'll take the front seat, thanks.
How is it in radio, John?
We're seeing, it's really, since, and this is going to upset broadcasters, but ever since deregulation, we've had all of these stations that have, radio stations that used to serve Muskogee, used to serve Pryor, used to serve Sapulpa, all moved to Tulsa. Mm-hmm. And they all want to be a Tulsa radio station. And journalism is dying in those small towns because there's nobody covering the Pryor City Council meeting for radio. There's nobody covering the Muskogee City Council for radio. People are not getting information.
Have you driven across this state of ours at night?
Yes.
Have you listened to what passes for broadcasting at night? The hate?
It's hate, or it's a better variety of today's classic hits, or some canned statement that happens. But deregulation was not a friend to radio.
And another thing,
the owners will disagree, but
while I'm on this little soapbox,
sure.
How do we justify to children, who, by the way, are no longer taught manners at home, how do we justify to children that it's all right to call a football player an SOB nationwide, or to denigrate women, on camera? How do we teach them that's wrong when somebody higher in government can do it and get away with it? John, help me with that, because I hear it defended when I'm driving from here to Fort Smith, Arkansas at night.
Freedom there. You've got the freedom to say what you want.
No, you don't.
But yeah, it's got to be within good taste, good manners. You know, you don't call somebody, as you said, an SOB.
Eddie Foy and the 8 Little Foys, big deal many years ago in vaudeville. And he used to say, my mother thanks you, my father thanks you, and all my brothers and sisters thank you, and I thank you. He once said, under freedom of speech, every man, every woman, every child in this country can say anything they want to, any time they want to, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. And he said, let me make a point with that. He said, if you stand up in the middle of a crowded theater and yell fire, you should go to jail.
Right.
And he was right. Well, we need more time. Will you do it again?
Sure, we're done?
See, you always do that. You take up all my time. John Durkee, everybody. Johnny, thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you,
You're a
Sam.
good man. Tell your wife I said hey.
I will do so.
And someday you can buy me lunch.
Okay.
That's all the time we have for this edition of our Get Together. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.